It's been a while since I repotted an orchid with you guys, and in today's video I'm going to repot this overgrown Cattleya orchid. I'm really excited for this one. I got this from SVO about 3 years ago, and it is a flared flower crossed with a spotted flower. So this one's going to be really interesting when it blooms. Now I had two buds on it and they both blasted, and I realized when I was getting it out of its pot it is completely overgrown. This is a really vigorous Cattleya orchid. And it blasted because I couldn't keep up with the watering. Some of the roots started growing on the outside. So I got to free this up and get it into a better setup where I can properly hydrate it. This orchid, when I water it, it dries up within a day. So it has to come out of this setup. I potted this up in the semi-hydro method last spring, not last spring, but spring of 2022. So it's almost been 2 years, and I haven't really been enjoying the semi-hydro method. So I'm going to take this out of this grow system and put it in a bark and sphagnum moss organic pot. And I'm not going to be as gentle with this one. So guys, don't get too mad at me. I have 200 orchids, so if I took my time with all of them, I would never repot my orchids. So I got a little bit rough with this one, but it's because it is very vigorous, as you can see. And I'm going to get off all this leca, and we're going to get this into a better setup. This is a really fast-growing Cattleya orchid, and I'm repotting it less delicately because I know that it's going to bounce back very quickly. Otherwise, I would be more careful. Now, generally with an orchid like this, if it's root bound, you can put it in another pot and surround it with media, but it's so overgrown, I want to divide it. I don't want to put this in a 6-inch pot and then think that I need to repot it in a few months already. So I'm going to take the root ball apart here and then divide this orchid, and then give half to a friend, and then hopefully the division that I keep will be okay for about 2 years. So I am, as I said, a little bit rougher with this, but overall I think this orchid is going to be okay. You can leave leca on because it is inorganic, but I removed what I could, and then I looked at the root system, which was in really, really good shape. This is very, very vigorous. We do have some roots that are dead that I'll cut off, but it wasn't many. But because this is a Cattleya orchid, they do tend to dump their roots. So we'll keep that in mind since I'm being a little rough. But these are the old roots that were on this orchid's back bulbs. So I removed those, and then I'm looking through the root ball to see if there's any hollow roots or any roots without any substance on it. But anything that I broke, it may dump, but this orchid has a lot of new roots. And if you look at that container and that root ball, you could see why the buds that I had on this kept blasting. It was just, the deli container was just not big enough to keep this thoroughly hydrated. So here are the new roots here that are going to take over for the orchid. We have a new growth coming in, and I'm trying to find a point where I can divide this orchid. So I'm taking off some more leca, and I'm going to try to figure out what's that best point where I could divide this orchid. And the first thing that comes to mind in making this orchid a little bit smaller after I remove these roots is I'm thinking of removing the back bulbs. So I see the new growth there. I go to the back, and I don't think I need the back bulbs, so I think I'm going to trim that off. When you're dividing a Cattleya orchid, it's good to have new roots growing. It's ideal if you have new growths. You need at least 4 canes. 5 is even better. 6 is even better. But I couldn't find the rhizome really well, so I was just like, let me get rid of the back bulbs and then go from there. You don't have to remove them, but this is just me taking off the oldest growths so that I can make the plant smaller, and then I could see where I can divide. But you can absolutely keep them on. They serve as energy for the plant, and this is just me trying to make the plant a little bit smaller. So I took the back bulbs off, and it has some good roots, but when I took it off, I was able to find a more suitable point where I could divide this orchid because the rhizome was kind of growing everywhere. And I found a natural point where this Cattleya was breaking apart. And then I just decided to untangle the roots right there. So I see the rhizome right here. I see new roots on the division to the left, and I see some viable roots on the piece to the right. So what I'm going to do is slowly untangle this and try not to break the roots, but this was ideal because it was a natural point that it broke off. So we took the rhizome apart here, and now we're going to take these spaghetti noodles and we're going to detangle them and make sure that they don't break too much. I know I'm not being as gentle as normal, but we have a division right here. We have about 6 growths on this. Unfortunately, no new growths, but this one is the better division. This has new root tips, which is ideal. We have a new growth coming in right here, and we have some roots that that may dump, but this new root system was growing outside of the pot, so we want to put this inside of the pot. So I went ahead and rinsed off the roots to clean everything off, and we're going to get started in potting these up. So this little division, not ideal, but I think it's fine. It has good roots. Of course, it can dump some of these roots, but one of the growths that it has was a newer growth that came in. This other one is more ideal because you have new root tips, but I think both are going to be fine. So we're going to start with the smaller one. I have a 4-inch pot here, and I'm going to put a little bit of moss at the bottom. I like moss in my environment because it holds more moisture and it allows me to water a little bit less. And we're going to take these roots and put it into this 4-inch pot. I think a 4-inch pot is perfect for this because it is a decent root system for this division, and I think it will be able to hold itself up. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some bark and surround this. And I'm going to pack this down in here, and this will give enough moisture and air for this to grow. I'm going to keep this orchid nice and warm. I'm not going to fertilize it for a bit, and we're going to hope that this gets new roots. I think it's going to be fine. This is the gamble when you're kind of dividing small pieces. We're going to see how this goes. My biggest concern is just making the larger plant bigger, but this should be okay. I should be able to share this with a friend, but I'm going to give it a couple of weeks in warm conditions under lights, and then just watch for new roots to push through. And once there's new roots pushing through, then I'll feel comfortable giving it to a friend. But I think this old root system will sustain it. Again, it may dump some roots. Cattleyas are prone to it, but this is a very, very vigorous hybrid. So I think this is going to be okay. And this orchid is prone to spotting, so that's just because it's getting really good light. And what I'm trying to do here is make sure that this orchid doesn't wobble so it could stay steady, and I think this is going to be just fine. Moving on to the larger orchid, I'm just seeing if I need to remove any other roots. Everything here is nice and firm and viable, but I did break some off. But like I said, this is a really vigorous one. This is really the meat of the plant, and this is what I cared about the most. We have new root tips. We want to be careful with those new roots. And I think because this root system was growing outside of the pot, that's why the orchid was blasting so much. So we have a bigger pot here. I think this is a 6-inch pot. We're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to take some sphagnum moss and put it at the bottom of the pot. Then I'm going to layer some bark here. This is going to be a nice airy mix, but will also hold very decent moisture here where I probably can get away with watering this just maybe once a week. So we're going to take this root system and we're going to put it into this nice large pot. I still can't believe it was in that deli container, but we're going to gently tuck these roots inside. It's ideal to soak the roots so that the roots are nice and pliable. And we're going to tuck everything in. So these new root tips should adapt to the new media here and grow in seamlessly. And hopefully the next time we get a bloom, we're able to see what they look like, because I'm really excited for what this is going to turn out to be. If you have ordered orchids from SVO, you know that the unregistered hybrids are pretty much a surprise and they all look different. So I'm really excited to see what this is going to be about. Now it's growing kind of rambly, so there's a leaf under there. I'm just trying to tuck in the roots as best as possible. And I'm probably just going to leave the leaves there. Sometimes when you get seedlings, the new growths grow in a weird pattern, but it's fine. I'm just going to surround this with bark, and we're going to tuck this in there and make sure it's nice and sturdy. And we're just going to sandwich this with some bark. I also bought this bark from SVO as well. They call it kiwi bark. And I'm having really good results with it. We're going to add a little bit more moss just so that I don't have to water so much. We're just going to go from there. And like I said, we're not going to fertilize this because it just went through some trauma with me taking it out of the leca. And even when I'm putting the bark in here, some of those roots are going to get a little bit bruised, so it may dump some of them. But I'm not too concerned because this is a very vigorous orchid. And I'm finding as you're growing orchids for a while, you become less and less careful with some of your hybrids. Now, of course, you can't treat some of your species like this, and it's best to wait for new root tips, especially on a division where, like the other one, it wasn't optimal, but because it's a vigorous hybrid, I think it'll be just fine. But I just find that when I was growing orchids before, I used to take an hour for a repot, sometimes 2 hours, and now I'm like, it's okay, especially if it's vigorous like this one. But I hope that in a couple of months, I can see the blooms. Hopefully it won't blast, and I can't wait to show you what this looks like. It's going to be a flared, spotted, beautiful orchid. I cannot wait to see it. I'll post it on Instagram as soon as it starts blooming, and I'll show it, of course, in my monthly updates, but I'm excited for this one. So I'm topping this off with bark, and we're pretty much done. I don't even need a stake for this because the root system is so extensive. It's something that I don't typically get with other orchids. This orchid is able to stand up on its own, and once again, I'm really excited to see it bloom. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye, everyone.